Welcome to my photo friends. I'm your host Joshua. I'm a photographer, and for the past 10 years, I've been involved in the Elgin photographic community. Through those years, I've met dozens of local photographers. Meeting these photographers brings genuine excitement to me as a photographer. You see, photography can be a very individual activity, since there is only one person pressing the shutter button. By getting to know other photographers, I get to learn from their passion and knowledge. By sharing these interviews, I hope any photographer can learn and become an even better photographer and artist. But before I begin, I'd like to thank a few people. First off, thank you to my wife, Sarah. Her wisdom has been essential as I have developed this interview series. She has spent hours hearing my ideas and providing encouraging feedback. Secondly, thank you to Side Street Studio Arts and their staff for serving as our host for this interview. Side Street's impact on our community cannot be overstated. They provide inclusive access to exhibition, performance, education, and advocacy resources because, in their words, art is important. I am honored and thankful that we are able to use their performance space. Lastly, thank you to Ray, who is managing the recordings. I first met Lance in this room at Side Street during the first Elgin Fringe Festival. We were both photographing a dance group, and I was immediately impressed by his ability to capture the moment in each dancer's movement. 10 years ago, I watched his uncanny ability to know when to press the shutter button, and in the years since, I have continued to be impressed by his knowledge of the art of photography and his knowledge of the science as well. Please welcome Lance as my next photo friend.
Thanks.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your photography journey? And I think we've got some photos to accompany.
Probably too many. I've grown up in Elgin my whole life, just kind of up past where the riverboat is now. I would say in general, as a kid, I spent a lot of time on computers. I spent a lot of time in arts, painting, sketching, a variety of those types of physical arts, never really so much into photography. When I was in Cub Scouts for a long time, and they sell the popcorn or whatever they sold back then. And if you sold the most in the whole whatever area, you got a camera. And I really wanted one. So I sold as much as I could, and I got it, and I won it. And I could never figure out how to use it. It was an old 35 millimeter, and I was used to like Advantix at the time, Panorama, or like 110 cameras. So I never ended up really getting into 35 millimeter photography. So it wasn't until that digital came around that it sort of like married my interest in technology with my interest in photography. And so a lot of my early cameras that I got, digital cameras, were actually from my grandfather because he used to trade equipment with people. That was a big thing back then, to trade. So I would trade some of my computer stuff to get some of those early like Kodak, I don't know, DC-10 or whatever, 320 by 240 or maybe even less cameras. And that's sort of how I started into photography. And so early on with photographs, I was traveling. I started traveling around then, around early 90s or so. And so I think the traveling internationally really was what did it for photography for me versus painting or versus art, where I would sit there for days on end producing things. And so with a camera, like I could travel to these places and I could capture what I saw and what I remembered. And so that's kind of what did it. And so let's go next one. So then after that, that was maybe, I don't know, early 2000s or so. I started thinking back to that 35 millimeter and back to the analog process. And so how could I bring that into what I was doing digitally? And so for me, like there's a lot of his photography, like the capital A art or a lowercase art, and what is capital A art and what is art. And so to me, photography has always been this physicality of the art form. So producing the final print or this one item that stands in the real world is kind of what has always defined art to me in photography versus the process and the taking of and the technology. And so I explored a lot with platinum printing. So I would create these digital negatives, and I bought an old blueprint plate burner from that you know, places are clearancing out the printing presses, and so I would produce, if you want to go to the next one, I think, I would produce a lot of platinum prints of my work. And so around this same time, I started getting into more, well, I guess I should say, like early on, I'm never a people person. I've never really liked taking pictures of people. But like as I would travel and as I would do more and more with photography, people would be like, hey, can you take pictures of my kids, right? Or can you take pictures of my family? And initially it was no, I don't take pictures of people. There's no people in my travel pictures. There's no people in the stuff I take pictures of. But you know, people wear on you and then they get you to say yes. And so I say yes. And so around that time is when I started doing stage photography. My wife teaches dance, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. But you know, when she would spend all these days at rehearsals and stuff, I would want to go and hang out. And so, well, I got a camera and there's something happening on stage. So I would start working on taking these stage photos. And so eventually that led into, well, hey, you're taking these really nice stage photos. Can you do like our studio photos too? So if you want to, do we go forward from here?
I lost my mouse.
Oh, it's okay. So that's sort of how then I got more involved in taking pictures of people. And so then eventually, you know, there's a lot of the senior stuff. And so at that time, obviously, I didn't do a lot of studio photography with travel. Like I didn't carry a light around, I didn't do anything. Stage photography was sort of the same thing. I didn't carry lights around or do anything. It was just whatever was in the environment. So it's very document-oriented into photography. But then when I start working on people, with people and going to the studio, then you have to learn lighting and you have to do all these things. And so then that sort of was where what kind of got me interested into it. So, you know, like from that last photo, like if you go back, and then this next photo, you know, this is taken just down the street, and this is actually taken in the field, you know, in Festival Park, just in the middle of a field. So like there's a lot that I found out I could do in terms of studio photography. And so that's really what brought me into how like my photography turned into dance, turned into specifically studio oriented as my main gig.
So we can't really talk about dance photography without talking about your wife's dance history and performance and education. How does that collaboration work, and what benefits does it bring to your photography?
Sure.
Yeah.
So like I said, when we get into the studio photography and working with individual dancers, I don't dance. You know, a big feat is like getting up in the morning and getting out of bed and making it down the stairs. Like that's a lot of exercise. So she's obviously taught dance for a number of years. She danced for you know, decades longer. And that was kind of how we got into it. So when we move into like the studio, we move into a lot of the volume work. When I'm working with a lot of these dancers, you know, maybe I get 30 seconds per person, 45 seconds per person. And so having someone there that knows dance, that can help sort of direct what we're doing is really more important almost than me pressing the button. So, you know, there's a lot that goes into a shoot like this in terms of like the technology and the people and the place. And so managing all of that is very difficult. So you need people to help. And so my wife is that person that's able to do that. You know, when I get up, if you go back one really quick, you know, and I try and get into these crazy, goofy positions to teach them, you know, this is what I'm looking for in the dance thing. And then she can be like, oh, no, this is what it's called. That doesn't look right. Like, this is what it should look like. And then I can be like, oh, but, you know, let's move the arms or let's, you know, shift the position or whatever to make it a better photograph. And that's kind of how we work together to produce the images that we do.
And I think we've got a couple more of these.
You can skip to the next. And so just over time in the studio too, just working with the different dancers and working with the different backgrounds or different lighting styles, you know, when I set a lot of this stuff up, I have certain things that I'm looking for in it. in the images that I want to create. So photography for me isn't just about documenting a thing or a place, right? It's about having an idea, working with these people, working with like a group of people and the technology to produce the images that I want. Can you guess where this photo is taken? Anybody? I put this one in just for this.
In here?
Yeah, right here, right over there. A couple of feet from here. I was probably standing right where you're sitting when I took that photo.
And I remember a photo that this was probably a couple years ago, that you posted in one of those windows. Right. And I was like, oh, it was perfect.
Yeah, I love those windows for that. Before the black drapes and stuff, but you can take those down.
Yeah.
At the end, or if you get bored listening to me, I did bring books and stuff back there of pictures, and I did keep a series of images that were taken in this space, thinking we would be up here.
Yeah. Okay, so I realized as I was preparing for this that the last time I saw your kids was a few years ago, so they're going to be a lot older than what I remember, but that being a parent adds a completely new dynamic to trying to manage a second business as well as a full-time career and a family. How do those struggles all line up with trying to manage photography that obviously takes place after the 9 to 5?
Yeah, I would really like just to quit everything and focus on the family. But mentally that's always very challenging because you need, with a career, and especially like I work in Chicago, so I spend a lot of time commuting, and a family, so I take them to school in the morning and I try and pick them up and stuff, and the weeknights are all activities. And so over the years, like now they are middle school and elementary, and so it becomes much more difficult to manage stuff. A lot of the dance stuff specifically is weekends. So a lot of our weekends are spent, or if we do some senior photos, we spend a lot of our weekends doing that, and then it's like somebody has to watch the kids or the kids are alone. So it is a very difficult and challenging thing, and luckily I have very good kids who understand, and they're excited by what we're able to create and make. And I think it sets a good role model for having passions that are artistic and having passions that are maybe more technical, along with, balancing family and cooking and cleaning.
And there's got to be something said for you and your wife being able to do this artistic endeavor
together. Yeah, we're still married, so that's fantastic. She's still with me. Yeah, a lot of times, it's like I just push the button and she does all the work is what I like to tell people. So, no, it works out great. And like I said, she makes a lot of what we do possible. So it is definitely both of us working to create these things. A lot of, like when people say like, we talk about the process and we talk about the creativity and we talk about the art and we talk about the technology and stuff. And so that's like what it means to be a photographer. But in reality, for like what we're doing here, it's kind of like the photographer is a visionary, a photographer is a designer. And so there's all these different roles that the photographer has to play in it. And so it really helps to have people that are supportive of you in the community, especially with Side Street, having performance spaces and presentation spaces. For a decade now, one of my focuses was always producing that final piece of art, that physical print just for display here. Early on, I didn't talk about it earlier, I used to do a lot of competitions. So like I would do the PPA stuff to get in their book, or I would do, I would try to medal in things in Australia and stuff. And it was very fun, and it was very successful. But at some point, it's like you don't get to see a lot of it, it's all off. It's, these things that you submit to. So having a place locally where you can show your work and talk to other people and do stuff is huge in just supporting the journey that you make as an artist.
Yeah. I wanted to go back and look at 3 photos real quick that kind of have dealt with these.
I gave you enough. We got plenty to go through.
Yeah, so first of all, we have this screenshot that I took
that one
off
I
of your
didn't
website.
give you. No.
Yeah. But this is, I love this photo. I realize it's small. On the video, it's going to be big, so you guys have got to watch the video. But like, your wife's lovely smile, and then you're like in the zone, and yeah, it's a great collaborative photo.
I love this photo. It was taken by a friend, Meredith, who's also she has a bunch of kids that dance, and so she does a lot of dance photography. And so I've worked alongside of her on stage stuff and with some of the families that we work with and stuff. So I was very happy she was able to capture this.
Yeah.
Because it really summarizes like what other people see, but I never see while we're doing the stuff.
Yeah. And then, so far as work that you're presenting, I think.
Yeah, that was downstairs.
Yeah.
So this is sort of that work-life balance thing. You know, this was a collaborative piece with I believe Chloe Tough was her name, and so it was like, how can a painter or someone that does painting and stuff work with a photographer to create a new piece of art? So she had created this swirly back part thing, and then I brought in a dancer and we hung it up on the wall and we photographed it. And then she took that photograph, and so then I layered it kind of in so it was built into the paper piece that she made, and then she did some more retouching to make it more painterly on the top. And so these types of collaborations are really fantastic to work with other artists to try and create new things in the world. But it is extremely difficult, time-consuming process. And while I would love to do stuff like this, like that is just something I don't have time for.
Yeah.
You know, these days, like especially as the kids get older, a lot of, because it's a business also, obviously. And so there's like the art side of the business and the business side of the business. And so there's a lot more of the business side that happens these days, because I used to say yes to everything and everybody, but I can't. So I'm learning the word no. But that also means that a lot of the art stuff that I used to pursue, I don't have the time to pursue as much as I used to. So yeah, this is one of those pieces that was...
And I remember this being like hanging in the gallery.
Yeah.
And just like, it was huge.
Yeah, it's six feet tall,
yeah.
Thereabouts, 4 feet. So it was a trick to print and frame and figure out how to mount, and it was just like a ton of those fun challenges to produce a piece of art. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I actually found, I'm cleaning out one of my flat files at home of work, and I threw a bunch in those, and then this I found in a thing actually, so I still have it.
Very cool. All right, moving on to a little bit different of a topic. During that first Fringe Festival, I was impressed by your images, but I was equally impressed by how few photos you took to capture those images. We had a group of photographers. There were 50 of us that varied from amateur to like full-time professional. Keith was one of the photographers. But even most of the professional photographers would capture take 3 to 5 frames in order to get that one photo. And I do that when I photograph my daughter's dance or performances. You know, you see the movement coming up, I start hitting the shutter button and I get 6 frames. And digital allows us to do that. But you seem to have an uncanny ability to nail the shutter at the right time. Can you talk about getting that moment?
Yeah, I miss the days when my camera only took like one frame a second. Before I get into the studio stuff, because there's sort of 2 sides to it. Oh no, you can keep that photo up, it's a very nice photo. You know, camera technology changes a lot, and so a lot of what I did back then was the limitation. Is like you only got one photo, and there's a delay when you press the shutter button. There's a delay between when you take the picture and what you're seeing happens. You know, and mirrorless has exacerbated that. So a lot of this stuff is still shot with a mechanical shutter back then. And so one frame was kind of what I grew up getting used to, shooting a lot of those performances. And so you learn to read a dance and stuff, and music always helps, although there's a lot of times that I'll be listening to music expecting something to happen, and like nothing interesting ever happens. They're just like moving across the stage. You know, these days, like the camera that I shoot stage stuff with, you know, takes like 120 pictures a second. Like and it takes pictures before I press the shutter button. So I press the shutter button, and I get a bunch of pictures before I press the shutter button, and a bunch of pictures after I press the shutter button, and I come home with 100,000 pictures. And it's like, what happened to the day when I took like one picture? And that was the photo I wanted. You know, and so I do miss those days, and it was a lot of fun to just get the shot for stage photos. But there's a lot of those, there is always like the moment, right? They're at the apex of a jump, or they're at a specific movement. But, you know, even when they're doing stuff like their arms are moving in a thing, their feet are moving in a thing, their body's moving, their hair is moving. So the ability these days to capture more than 1 frame per second, especially close in it, where you'll get a series of maybe 5 frames within a hair of a second, you can look at it and you can decide artistically, like which hair, you know, do I like those feet or do I like that, you know? And so it makes taking photos harder. so I do miss the days when it was sort of easier, and that was the picture I got, and it was pretty good.
Yeah.
So that's for stage. For studio, I still only take one picture. So like when I do something like this, I don't look through the camera. So I will frame a shot, I will set the lights, I will decide what I want them to do, we will walk through like what they're doing. And then I will just hold the camera down here, right? And then I will watch them. And so as I see their movement and I see what they're doing, I will take the picture. So it is definitely a feel thing. It is definitely, and if they do a jump where their feet are very, very fast, like, or tap is very, very fast, it is hard to get the one picture. And so you will have to do it multiple times in the studio. But I do like the slowness of the single shot for doing studio work.
Yeah, and I miss this for stage, which is just an incredible photo. I love it.
So that's an example of, and so.
Many of your photos are created in the studio or for a dancer's portfolio. What's the hardest part of envisioning that catalog of poses and photos for the dancer?
Yeah, because if you haven't noticed, like dance is a big thing now, right? Like 15 years ago, there weren't a lot of dance groups. These days, there's like all types of dance, so many places. Like it is everybody photographs it. So there's a lot out there to sort of pick from. And so, but every person, every dancer can't do every pose. So it is important to a lot of the dancers that we photograph I know, or I've seen them dance, or I've seen what they can do. They all have a specific style, they all have something that they're good at, the way their body moves, the way they work. So I normally start from there, like these are the poses, this is the type of image that I think that they would look good in for a specific thing. And then you have to think about like, well, how would you light that pose? And so then I will sort of decide, I will define like a lighting paradigm that I want set up for that specific pose or that specific dancer that I think would benefit them. And then also as a space, like what's the space that I'm going to put them in. And so I'll do all of that, and I will create like boards of poses that I have seen that I like for each dancer. And then I show my wife, and she will veto like most of them as not being good poses, and then we work with it. But when you move into every pose, there are, and this is another key point for her, actually, go back 1 second, sorry, is there are different types of dance where some dance poses are defined, this is the way it has to look, right? This pose has to look a specific way. So it can only be photographed from a specific direction, from a specific height, and a specific thing for it to be approved by my wife or the dancer as to what it should look like. Whereas if you go to the next photo, you have more artistic things where it's not for a specific person, so we can hide the legs, or maybe she doesn't have to be, an elevator, and then we can decide what we want to do with the hands to actually create the shape and create the form and create an artistic image for what we're going for. So those are the types of decisions. If I just had a dancer come over and be like, okay, show me what you're going to do, and then try and decide how I'm going to light it, like there's the whole day right there just trying to answer that one question. So I have to define very precisely like what I want out of a session before they come in. And that's the same even for like the volume work too. Like I'll define a certain set of poses that we're going to go for a specific dance or something. And we'll create boards for the dancers based on like their ability levels or the type of dance. Because otherwise you will spend all of your time trying to get like the arm in the spot you wanted and the head in the right direction, the light in the right place, and the feet. All my volume work, all my photos, I generally do different every single time. Like I don't have a setup that I go to for volume, which is very uncommon in the industry. So I will move a light around. Like if they're going left, I'll have the light on the left. If they're going right. So I approach a lot of the dance stuff from the point of a portrait first, and then as a dance second.
And then you've got two other that are group photos.
Oh yeah. So the difference when you say like the pose catalog, especially when working with older groups, like they know what they want. They have their poses. So it's a matter of making sure like that the spacing is right, that the directionality of the light is right, and then they will approve it, and they will go through and they'll look at them and decide this is what we're going for, we're going to try and do it again. So you can still create the space, you can still add all the elements that you want to sort of set the mood of the picture. But at the end of the day, the dancer is going to decide like that's a photo that represents me, or yeah, that sucks. Don't show anybody that photo ever.
You've got a second one here.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same group.
Same group, yeah.
Yep.
So that's where I was getting at with every year, you know, when we photograph them, I have to come up with a new idea on what I want their images to look like. So we'll talk about color and we'll talk about form and like, is there a specific thing that they want to express from their group each year?
Very cool. Do you have a photo that's like a mirage that you've tried to capture,
Yeah.
you've pursued, and it just never shows up?
Yeah, sort of. So as I mentioned, like I don't do a lot of the same photo twice, and I try and create a setup for every dancer that's different. And so obviously, like best laid plans, it never works out exactly as you intend. So every photo I take is really the mirage that I still haven't gotten to. So like what's my favorite photo, and it's always the next photo. Because like I'm going to do it better the next time, or I'm going to get it right the next time. So really there isn't a photo. There's very few photos I've taken where I look at them and I was like, oh my God, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was going for when I started 2 weeks before, you know, planning the photo.
So we've got a few of these where, if you wanted to talk briefly about them.
Just so, you know, like I have a very small studio in my basement, so you never really know, like a dancer's going to come in with ideas, and so you have to be able to like adjust the light or adjust the scene based on what they want, you know, also. So even though I may have ideas and I can do this whole list of poses, and they can come in and I'll show them ahead of time, but they'll come in and be like, this is what I really want to go for. And then you're like, okay, well, we can light that, we'll change this, or we'll make this do. So it is very fluid, and I never really know, like, from going into it, what's coming out the other side.
And, we'll pull these up. So there's a couple more.
You know, and that's an example. So like every photo shoot I do, I try and come up with new and different ideas. So like Mylar is fun to play with, so trying to get the Mylar. A lot of these ideas, like I will start with something small, and then it'll be a year or 2 years before I get back to that same idea. So Mylar was one I recently just sort of got. I needed a much harder light than I had been using previously to produce like the reflections that I wanted. So a lot of the ideas that I do, they're iterative. So every time, like I'll do a photo with a person and it's very nice, it's a great photo for them, but it's not what I was going for. It's not what I wanted out of it. So that's the difference.
Yeah. Outside of dance photography, we spent a half hour talking about that. Is there a style or subject of photography that you really enjoy?
Yeah, I think I sent you the one photo I've taken that's not dance. No, I'm just kidding.
Is that the photo of your wife?
Right.
Let's see. We got...
So there's a couple. So I like to garden. You know, I think the hobbies that I have are never ending. And so in the garden, obviously everybody likes to photograph plants and animals and insects and whatever. So I've always liked macro. But when I photograph the plants and the flowers, I'd like to approach them a little bit more abstractly. So this one was not brought into the studio. This one is just taken in the yard. But other ones of it, if you flip through like some of the others, you know, I'll bring into the house and I'll set up a lighting for it and I will light it and try and create images that are, you know, like if you know flowers, you would know what it is. But otherwise, you can just look at it and sort of enjoy it for its color or its form or its shape or its texture.
Yeah, it's a little bit more like living room art.
Right.
You know, yeah, you've got that.
Same thing like with the pond and stuff is very nice to try and create, you know, find the right light or the right time of the day or the right reflection, and then bring it into the process. I'll talk about that later, but yeah.
And then you've got,
I
want to skip right past this one because...
You like the other one better?
Oh, 100%.
Oh.
Do you not like the other one?
Oh, I love the other one.
Oh,
but this one was like, what do you do when you're at your friend's house who's also a photographer and it's New Year's Eve? Like, what are you going to do, right? Like, you could play a game or you could just like fill a fish tank with like, you know, blacklight style stuff and photograph it for fun all night.
So this is the one, I remember you did a series or an exhibition with something along this line. And you sent me this one and I was like, damn, that's amazing.
Yeah, I did this whole series with this. It's milk, or heavy cream rather, and India ink in a fish tank. So back to the same fish tank thing. I love the fish tank thing. I have so many fish tanks at home. I recently just got rid of a couple because it's like, do I really need all these fish tanks? But you know, so I'll set up all the studio lights around it and do everything to photograph it. And this is a funny one because this is with an older camera that I had. You know, and then you get a newer camera and you try and do the same thing and it's like never as good. And so I'm still trying to get back to this, but I've done many series sort of in the same line of things. And this was one of the ones that worked out better than I expected. But, yeah.
So at heart, you're a surrealist, is basically what you're
Kind
admitting
of.
to.
Like, and I would like to get to that in dance too. I think what holds me back a lot is that I approach dance from a portraiture point of view. And so like I always like the face and I always want, you know, the nice edge on the body. And so I think that really restricts me from like exploring other themes or other styles of lighting with them because I just get so stuck on it has to be a nice portrait.
That could be your mirage.
At the end of the day. So maybe that's the mirage.
I think this is my last photo. What's the hardest part of that creative process? Like we've talked about everything from envisioning what the photos are going to be, and we haven't really talked about the sales process, but what during that, you know, scheme, what's the hard part? I'd
have a much better business if I was better at the sales part. So we could skip that one. But no, I really enjoy the whole process. You know, when you go into it, and I think you'll get the idea from what I've talked about, especially coming at it from studio, is there's the technology, which I obviously really enjoy a ton. And that goes all the way from, you know, building a set or setting a scene or, you know, the whole process in the Lightroom or, you know, if I do bring a photo into Photoshop. But just creating the ideas is really challenging to do it differently for every single dancer to try and create them unique images. And so I have never really felt I am that creative. And so I always grapple with myself on coming up with creative ideas. So I look for inspiration a lot, you know, from other places that I see, but I would say that the creativity has always been my hardest, like my own personal roadblock. The technology comes easy, like I can technology a photograph all day long, but you know, and then also I think grappling with that maybe the thing that hangs on the wall is the art piece. I would, you know, these days people aren't interested in that thing that hangs on the wall, so that's tough for me too, but I do enjoy the whole process and the creativity, and especially working with people these days. As much as I say I don't like people, that is what makes it the most rewarding.
I was going to say, did you accept the interview because I wore you down, or because you just like have given up on that aspect?
No, I've known you long enough that I can easily owe you an interview every so often. Other people, I think I would say no to, but
I appreciate it. So you've got. I want to look at these last couple of photos because they are a little bit more creative. You've got this lighting backdrop going on.
Yeah,
and then
so,
like a water?
So like I said, so it's mylar, right? And it's just a hard light hitting the edge and reflected on the background, and some light there, and then there's a star filter on the camera. And like I said, technology all day long to create images. But the point that I'm trying to get away from, although and this still is lit for portraiture, is to try and do less posed photography and more open. So she is very good. She's collegiate, graduated college now, but she did dance with there. So she knows how to move, she knows what she's doing, and she knows what she's looking for. So working with dancers like that allow us to sort of explore the movement aspect as opposed to just the still photography aspect of the form.
Yeah. And then you've got that one. Yeah.
And so same thing, working with things, you know, that are non-traditional on camera, like filters on the front or different lighting styles or techniques or Fresnel lenses and things that are maybe becoming more common, but are still not like commonplace in like a portrait kit that you would normally have in photography. But just ways to, I don't know, make the process more analog. But pretty much most of what I do is straight out of camera. Like those are both pretty much straight out of camera. And so then we can spend the second hour talking about AI in photography. I'm just kidding.
And have you just sold your camera so you can create AI images? Yeah. I do think that there's an element of creativity in like using Mylar or, you know, this window frame looking aspect.
Yeah, I wish I was a handier person that I could build sets better. Like, I would love to have a set builder on hand that could build me all of my wildest dreams. But
Your kids are getting older.
right,
Like,
I know.
set them on the career path.
I have a very small basement studio to work in. So, you know, the rooms I work in only have maybe 7-foot ceilings with all the pipes and stuff. You know, so I had to spray the ceilings white to do what I wanted to do. And I have to block out a lot of light. I use a lot of grids to try and control the light as much as possible.
Yeah.
And I think that helps. You know, those are all hard aspects of taking these types of pictures. You know, there's no window in my basement.
Yeah.
And so recreating those sets, like I said, the creativity to come up with these can be challenging to actually pull it off in such a small space. So.
Anybody else have questions?
As Josh referred to that, knowing exactly when to take that picture as opposed to 1,000 on either side of it. Because they are dancers, are you watching face? Are you watching body line? Are you watching movement?
That's a great question.
Do you have to pick one over the other in order to get the shot you want?
Yeah, a lot of times I will ask them like, hey, when you do that jump, I just need you to hold it there for like 2 seconds before you come down. I would be I'm so surprised sometimes when they're like, okay, like, and they stay there longer. But no, to seriously answer your question, I mean, that is serious. But in every movement, I often do the timing based on the fastest moving body part. So like if their feet are coming together, or if their feet need to be at a specific height for a specific pose, that is the element that I'm looking for. And then after we see that, like maybe their arms are doing something goofy. And then we'll say, okay, now do it again, same thing, but try and put the arms this way. You know, and they may not be able to hit that same height with the arms in a different position because it's all about their body movement to get it to where they're trying to go. So, so I'll start with the fastest moving component normally is where I try, and then we try and eke out the slower moving things. You know, we will move the hair to a side, let's try it again with the hair to the left, or let's put your hair up for it. Things like that to get it out of your face.
The equivalent of, on a television or movie set, you might make multiple takes based on what you had before in order to get to the combination of things that you want in your mind.
Yeah, she's really good, you know, so we can, when we're doing through the movement, sort of like I said, we'll just take a bunch and then we'll try and see if we got it. If we don't, then you can sort of go through those movements again to try and get what we're going for, because like I said, the elements change. But in the poses where it's like we're looking for the apex of a jump or the longest leg line or something, I'm looking for those elements, and that's the timing that I go off of to take the photo.
You said that you do different dancers who are experts in certain areas. Do you find that modern dancers are harder to photograph than ballet dancers? Ballet is that specific form exactly this way, and modern dance is a completely different thing.
Which type of dancer
They're all
is the
fantastic. They're all so good.
But what's more difficult for you as a photographer?
Yeah.
They're doing their job.
Between those two, I would say one is not harder to photograph than the other. I would say like modern and contemporary is more fun to photograph because you can work more with the dark and the shadows, and you can work more with the movement. And it's not about this arm has to be at this degree and this leg line has to be at that degree. When you're working with ballet, it is very specific and rigid how you need to photograph it. So, you know, if we're doing audition photos for somebody or something like that, we're looking for a very specific thing. And we will redo that photo far more than we would for like a modern or contemporary who is much better with like, oh yeah, I like my arm like this, or let's, you know, see that movement. So I would say I enjoy, you know, the freedom of the movement in the other ones. The ballet is always very pretty to photograph. Like you get a fantastic image, but it is much more rigid than other types of photos.
Thank you.
I have a question. Besides the studio work for dancing, do you photograph on a live play, or they set a rehearsal specific for the...
So So that's what I was referring to, like stage photography refers to all live performances. So I don't get to control anything in it, and I get to suffer with the lighting that the stage has set up, which, you know, modern cameras and technology helps to alleviate a lot of that, and every generation is better and better. Of course, the stages also change, and, you know, hopefully they get better and better. But yeah, you know, and we do stuff outdoors and we do stuff in the studio, and the business side is a lot more the stage stuff, or the volume. That's all the business side. The stuff like I do at my house is less the business side and more the art side. So I do like the video recordings for performances, and I'll also take photos during it, and then sometimes rehearsals and things too. I get hired to do.
Do you pull stills off the video set?
Well, we could. I love that topic, right? So that's a technology topic, right? And so we have just moved into the era of 8K video at 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second soon. So why am I sitting there taking photos when I could do 8K video, 120 frames per second, and you could pull any still you want, and you can print it wall-sized? So I really see that. I do feel like if we were going to talk about AI in the future, like that would be an area that would be trivial to approach and sort of replace stage photography from that point. You know, there's a lot you can talk about color space and gamut, you know, and ISO and how clean the frame is and those things. But at the end of the day, like the tools to clean up frames are so good, and upscaling is so good these days that that I really feel like I have had some dancers come to me and be like, "Hey, did you catch my final bow? I wanted a photo of me bowing." And like I don't normally take a lot of bow photos for like every single person that's bowing, but I could go into the 4K video or 6K video is what I normally shoot, right, and pull out a great still and upscale it, you know, or crop in and upscale it, and it's a very fine, you know, 8x10 print. You wouldn't really notice a difference. So it's just who wants to go through that many photos. Is really we really need the computer to pick out the best elements, not the people.
It's not 120 frames, it's 120 frames for the entire performance.
Right.
Over and over.
Yeah. So I would, you know, as still cameras move into the area of taking photos as fast as video cameras, that's where I really see the merger of it. You know, and now that we're finally getting back to global shutter, like global shutters were a big thing years ago, and now we're getting back to cameras with global shutters, which help a ton with stage photography. But that's sort of where video existed too. So stage is an interesting area that these days is coming together, video and stills.
Lance, thank you.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you again for
Appreciate
having
it.
me.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.